Well, it's 10 o'clock Eastern time, 9 o'clock in Louisiana. And once again, we are joined with our brothers from Louisiana. And we've got Grant Taylor and his father, Mark Taylor. And we've got Mr. Todd Langdon. Fellas, thank you so much for taking the time on a late Friday night to sit down and have a little discussion.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having us. Hey, if nobody else watches this, at least the four of us will probably enjoy it. So that'll be good.
Hey, believe it or hey, guess who? And it surprised me, but it didn't surprise me. Guess who our first 1,000 view video was? Podcast.
Oh, I looked a month or so ago, but I don't know. You'd have to. Yes,
Burley.
Burley.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, Burley.
Yes.
That dude, man, he preached. Now, wow.
Yeah, he's got a way about it, doesn't he?
Yeah, he sure does. But hey, so everybody, so that you know, once again, Todd and I got to tell you, Todd, where did we meet these men?
WFR Men's Retreat. Men's Ministry.
That's our tagline. I mean, everybody comes on here, everybody's like, oh, okay, just go ahead and say it. I know you got it. But to give you a little bit of background about Grant, and Grant, you can tell us more, just what I know about you. You were the former,
Why don't you just let him do that? That's why we have him on.
Yeah. Well, I can do that too.
Todd, fair point. You make a good point.
Well, Todd, you do know that I'm the only one that's ever been kicked out of the men's retreat. People, I did not get asked to leave. That's an inside joke. All right, Grant. I'm gonna tee you up. You and your dad take over and tell us where you're from, originally born, bred, and all that good stuff. And then Todd and I'll jump in and ask you a question or two.
Sounds good. Well, I'll start, and then I'll let Dad kind of walk it back a little bit. And I would just say we did meet at the WFR Men's Retreat, and my first recollection of John was very, very late one night, and he got up in front of a group of people and was going to tell a story. But to preface that story, he had to tell another story that dated back to the Civil War. And so I'm listening to a guy tell a story that had to have a story from all the way back in the Civil War. And I thought, man, I'm never going to get to bed tonight. So that was where my memory of John just, was ingrained in my head. I've never forgotten him. And so when you have 3 out of 4 long-winded people in a podcast, this could go more than 30 minutes. Man, I was born and raised in Texas, live in Louisiana now. Lived here for 13 years. It's been a mission field for me. I always wanted to be in Texas, and the Lord was like, well, I'm going to move you somewhere else so that you can know that this is about me and not about you. Worked at Buck Commander for about, 11 years until about 2 years ago. And it was just a fantastic time for me. Just a lot of things and a lot of great experiences. Met a lot of great people who have been instrumental in my life and have really been able to carry a lot of those relationships forward. And so I was blessed to grow up in a family of 4 children, my mom and dad, who have been married for 43 years now, and very proud of that. And so I'm the oldest of 4. And so I'm going to let Dad kind of tell you a little bit about his background and where he's from and the impact that has had on him, but also carrying over down the line to me and us kids and even to our families.
All right, so I'm too one of 4 kiddos. Grant is the oldest of our 4 kiddos, and I am the third of 3 boys, and we still have a little spoiled rotten sister. And I was born in Texas. Of the 4 kids in my family, I'm the only one who was born in Texas. My dad was a career Marine, and we of course moved everywhere frequently. And both my parents are from a little cotton community up in the Panhandle, Quanah, Texas. And the only reason I was born there is because he was about to go over to Korea. So he brought his pregnant wife home, my mom, with my two older brothers and I was born, he went to Korea, came back. We got a next tour of duty and so we moved on. So I was raised all around, like typical military kid. But then I ended up going to college in Texas, went to Huntsville, to Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, where I met my wife. And we eventually married, settled down there, had 4 kiddos. And I still live in Texas, live in Longview, Texas. There's some more story to that, but that's about 2 hours from where Grant and Caitlin, his family, lives. So that kind of gives you a little of my background.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, Mark, were you raised in a Christian family?
I was. My mom was, she was one of those girls when she was dating my dad and he was about to go overseas. She's one of those that said, I'm not marrying you before you leave. But when you get back, we'll probably get married. They did, of course, but she said, I'm going to marry a Christian man. That's important to me. And so it actually took several years for him to make a decision to follow Christ, be baptized. But he did. But I will just tell you this, every time we moved, there's 2 things that we found went looking for as soon as we moved to town. Where are the schools and where's the church? So that was just natural to me. I always have a memory of wherever we moved, they would take us by, here's where your school's going to be, and here's where our church is going to be. So yes, I was raised in a very functional family and believers.
Awesome.
And then that spilled over, I guess, into your children, you and your wife. Now, is your wife from Texas too?
She is. That was on the checklist. And she's from Texas and has a little bit different story. She was not raised in I'm going to say a believing family, a household, but it made an impression on her early on when she was young, when going to church. And so she felt drawn to that. And so when she went to college and out, as we do, get on your own, start making decisions, I actually met her at the campus student center. That's where we originally met.
Cool. Hey, so Grant, what was it? So when you were coming up in a Christian home, I guess, was there pressure? Which your dad wasn't a pastor, and sometimes those stories are a little different. Being a preacher's kid, but still, yet being raised in a Christian home, was there? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Did you feel certain pressures growing up as a kid or anything like that?
Obligation, pressure.
Yeah.
I honestly really didn't. Because I just felt like that's what we did. I mean, that's that. I mean, I didn't feel pressure. It was just such a function of who we were as a family. We never questioned it. And, some of my earliest, greatest memories are from friends and people from church and doing, you know what I mean? Like just that whole, so to me, I really actually enjoyed it because I felt like it was just a big family. And we would do New Year's Eve parties and it was such a part of the fabric of who we were as a family. I never felt that at all. And I think it came a point where I realized my faith was going to have to become my own and not theirs. But and I always wanted to. I was probably early on, I was a kid that wanted to achieve and please and meet everyone's favor and kind of, I liked the pat on the back and I think that would become an issue for me, down the road as I'm sorting through my faith and what's important and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But no, I never felt that. man, I just enjoyed it. It felt like a safe place. It felt like, I had, man, my best friends in the entire world went to church with me, and and we counted on each other all the way through high school. And so anyway, I did not feel that. I was very grateful for that, and I'm still very thankful for that foundation.
So other than your dad, is there who are some of the other people that were really super influential in your walk when you were growing up as a kid that had that influence or the impact on you that you can look back and see? I know that I've got some people in my life that probably saved my life back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that stand out readily aside, in terms of just mentors and aside from friends who we kind of walked through it together. I had a youth minister from the time I was probably, early elementary all the way into high school, who was incredibly impactful on me in my life. And, I can look from where I'm at right now and look back 35, 40 years and go, okay, there's 4, 5, 6 guys at different stages of my life who impacted me tremendously. Some of them more spiritually than others, but all of them incredibly impactful for me. And so I had a youth minister named Russell McLaughlin, who was, man, he just, he really encouraged me. He did a lot for our youth group and really kind of helped me establish a foundation, in that 12 to 16-year-old time frame that set me up for success, spiritually on down the road. And very grateful for Russell and the impact he had on me.
Todd, if you have some, you just got to let me know. So
Go ahead.
Mark, you and I, we grew up, we were kids, teenagers when Atari first come out. The old video game Atari. We had in West Virginia, I think we had 4 or 5 channels on the TV. You still had to get up and work the antennas around. And then eventually, so Grant, what I'm getting at is I think you're really close to my oldest son's age. Richie's 38, 39, somewhere through there. Are you a little older than that or a little younger?
Little.
So I figured you all were pretty close to the same age.
My front number is a 4, but whatever.
Well, Well, Richie's in a couple of months, he'll be 39. So he's closing in on it.
Yeah.
So knowing about that time frame, about what, cell phones weren't really big then, but the video game stuff was coming out. How have you, growing up through that techno age as a kid, did that influence you or did you see how it affected others around you?
I can remember getting a Nintendo when Nintendo was, the next thing from Atari. I would say yes. I feel like that was kind of, the early 90s was when video game, really kind of began to take over. And then you had Super Nintendo and say all these things. And, my dad was a very, he was kind of anything that was popular, he was anti that, right? If it was cool or popular, we're not doing that. If the shoes you want are cool, we're not getting those. If everybody's doing that, we're not doing it. If this is neat, if 4-wheel drive works, don't get it. So he was kind of like.
There's 2 sides to every story, right?
If you ask me the question, so there's that. But and he was, but that being said, we played video games and they weren't as bad. Now, I can remember in about 96 or 7, James Bond GoldenEye, came out. And I don't know if you remember that on Nintendo 64, man, it was all the rage. And, he's not a tech guy at all. He was get the video games out of here, get outside and rake the leaves and put that stuff down. But when I was in high school, I had the Nintendo in my room and everybody would come in there, but it was time to go to bed. Well, there's times as a high school student, I'm going to bed and here comes my non-techno dad to play James Bond Goldeneye at 10:30 at night in my room. I'm like, hey man,
And they're like, Dad, I'm trying to go to sleep. And I said, shut up, Grant, and face the wall.
I'm like,
By the way,
I love
last video game I ever played of any
and
consequence.
really first. So
And first, because I said, you know what? I don't like this stuff. It is intentionally addictive. I'm staying away from. I don't have any. Grant's kids can't play video games on my phone. I don't have any there. They go to grandma.
So yeah, I did, and it was impactful, and we've seen that. Now I think in a lot of ways, to be honest with you, like I'm more that way he was with my kids. I have a little more savvy, and I can beat them at Madden sometimes, but for me, I kind of outgrew that phase. I mean, once you get married, and I used to like to play a lot of golf, and then I had 4 kids, and my golf clubs have dust all over them. So I think as life moves on and you kind of move in and out of seasons, but it didn't control our life, because we did a lot of things when we were growing up. We played a lot of sports. We raised animals for 4-H and FFA, and so we were constantly on the move, and so it didn't dominate our life back then, really.
Mm-mm.
I met my wife through 4-H in West Virginia.
Man, John, we might be related between your Fastenal career and 4-H.
Who knows, man? It's the Appalachians. They might curl around there a little bit. Your dad did travel a lot.
Let's don't go down that road any further, though. Okay?
So as you get out of high school and into the college years, and you make that transition to your own and not at home, what did that look like? Because obviously, with the relationship you two have in front of us, and I've seen it in person, there was no ill effect in being away.
No, well, I would say, man, my parents, I don't know. I think maybe sometimes back then I felt like maybe strict was kind of how, but you know what I mean? But I also remember my dad, especially, who I felt like was the most strict. He also, at those times when I least expected it, he gave me room to make mistakes and make decisions. And, it was like, you feel like dad's fixing to just reign of terror on you, and all of a sudden he totally does a 180, and he doesn't, and you're like, man, this is really weird, because I feel like I should be grounded for eternity, and all these kind of things. And he really gave me a chance to kind of figure that out. And so, as much as the example was steadfast and perpetual and continual, the pressure was not, and the room was there for me to kind of figure that out. And so when I went to college, I found a church community that resembled a lot of what I had grown up in. And quickly I found myself doing a lot of the same things that I had done, because I felt like, well, that's what I did, and this is what I do. And which is fine. But I think after a while I started to think, I'm only doing this because I've always done it. And, I would do things like serve communion in the balcony at the church where I was, a big church. And, I felt like I was validating my faith by doing those things. And people could see me, and I'm like, when my parents come, the guy over here asked me to give communion or serve communion, and they can see I'm involved. And so, but after a while I realized that's not the correct mindset. And I'm only doing those things as a means of display and not in genuine faith. And so probably from 21 to really 30, 31. And really, once I got to WFR, I started to really figure out what genuine discipleship looks like, and how having your own faith really is important, and not just, doing something you've always done because you've always done it. And that's probably, so, it was probably from 20 to 30 was a real pivotal time for me. From 18 to 20, I left home. I was just doing the same things and checking those boxes. And if anybody asked or questioned, I was in church on Sunday. I was at church. I was I was doing all the things, but I would say that I really appreciated him and my mom kind of giving me that room to make that decision and have the opportunity to figure that out.
So as you transition and you make that transition from a traditional or what you had grown up doing to your own walk, and you said at WFR, how did that transition take place, and what did it look like from Dad's point of view of son getting his own, walking his own faith out?
You asking him?
No, he's asking you.
Well, I was asking you about that transition, that going from
the transition,
a traditional side. Right.
Let me give you a couple stories to kind of illustrate that. So when I first went, and there was several from 22 to 30, there were several different churches that I was a part of, and I learned from each of them some different things. So it wasn't just a WFR thing, although it did have a tremendous impact on me. But I can tell you this: when I first went there, I dressed like I thought I was supposed to dress, and I looked around and I was like, man, there's people in here wearing Saints jerseys. There's people in here wearing caps inside, and all other points in between. My father-in-law was the only guy in the whole congregation of 800 people that wore a suit, and everybody else. And then here comes Phil down the aisle, like he looks like he just,
came from the Dutch Fund, which he did.
Yeah, and I'm like, he's wearing sunglasses, and and I just thought, man. And then I thought I should go around and tell all these people to take their hats off. Because apparently nobody has volunteered for that role. And, where I grew up, when you walked in, there was a shelf, where all the.
Darn right.
All
Take
the
your
guys,
cover off.
And they lay their cowboy hat up on the shelf. And when church is over, they walk by and they get it and they put it on and they go out. But then I started thinking, what if I was the guy who went up to someone and told them to take their hat off? And because of me, they never came back. And so I just thought, man, walking with Jesus doesn't always look like me. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And do I look like I'm walking with Jesus, or am I one of these people that we're reading about in the Bible who's, adhering to a law and a set of rules? And I was like, man, I want to be somebody who's known for loving people where they're at. And so, as I kind of evolved in that, I remember now, okay, I've got this, new realization. And now I'm thinking back not only to the church that I grew up in, but the community that I grew up in and the guys that I grew up around and that I wanted to share with. And so now I'm starting to coach him on how they need to be doing it. And, and it was even kind of like, hey man, you need to, let me show you some things and you need to pick up on this. Cause I'm like, you need to go talk to my buddy. Cause I don't live there anymore. I live 5 hours away and I'm over here as a missionary in Louisiana. Okay. You're back home. You need to take care of my guys, right? Like those are, and probably there was a little bit of, and he was patient with me.
Dad, well, how come when I come home to church, I don't see this guy's not here, this guy's not, and I grew up, where are they? Or how come you're not?
Like, go get them.
And I'm like,
going after them.
Yeah, go get them.
All right, so then what happened?
Well, and then I'm like, wait a second. Why am I putting all this on him to do that when, why don't I do that?
We just let him go, Grant. We just let him go.
And so I think I started going back, once a month, kind of like you guys would come meet with us. I would go back and meet with those guys. And man, instead of putting it on him, why don't I do something? And so,
hey, Dad, would it be all right if I come to Huntsville where we lived and invite some of my buddies in the backyard? We'd like to have a campfire and maybe a Bible study. And I said, okay. I wasn't going to be there that weekend. And so he called to see if, I said, no problem at all.
Yeah.
And that's how that started.
And so I think that kind of, to me, was, and guys started going. And look, there was other guy, Adam LaRoche was one who impacted me in that. He told me about a Bible study he had at his house. And he said, man, I'm going to tell you, Grant, he said, you can invite the guys that you think will come. But he said, what I would challenge you to do is go through your phone and find those guys in your contacts list that you think would never show up or would never want to be a part of that. And he goes, you call those guys. And he said, and you ask them, and he said, and they'll show up, and they'll be the ones who are asking you when we're having it again. And man, that really impacted me. And again, our walk is perpetual, right? Like we're constantly learning and growing. And so, that was where I was like, okay, I can do this. This is not about just me showing up and singing the songs and knowing the songs and doing right. This is just about having an authentic relationship with Jesus. And what you realize is it's not about me. It's about him in me. And when people see that, it's not me, they see him in me. And that's what they crave, because everything else you try is unfulfilling. Mm-hmm. And so that takes kind of the pressure off of me as I go, it's not whether I can or can't, because I really frankly can't, but through him, he takes care of all that. So, once you realize that, hey man, just go out there and get after it. People laugh at you. So what? They're going to, and that's just part of it. But, so I think that was kind of a big thing for me. And, like you, Todd, I shared my testimony one time, and I was like, man, a week or two before me, a guy had spent years in Angola, which is one of the, rough prisons in Louisiana, and he, all these things. And another guy, sold, and I'm like, man, I haven't done any of that, and I almost apologized for my testimony. And a guy came up to me.
I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and tell you, I get more inspiration from testimonies like yours than the testimony I have, or somebody with a rough testimony.
Yeah.
I get more inspiration from guys like you, because it literally shows everybody needs Jesus.
Yeah.
And then shine Jesus forward.
Right. Well, and what you so many people and guys that I share my story with go, man, I want my kids to have a story like that. I didn't know you could have a story like that. And I'm like, I really didn't know people didn't. I thought this was just the way it is. And so it really kind of illuminated for me how blessed I am to have, a dad who, really has raised me like he has, and some parents who have given the example that they have given. And the other thing I would say that, and I don't know if you guys were there, Kellett mentioned this. He said, the best testimony ever is Jesus, and he never sinned. And so you don't have to have a testimony that is, riddled with horror to have an impact. Yep. And so when you think about it like that, you're like, hey man, this don't feel,
apologetic.
Yeah, apologize for that. Just share that, because that's and ultimately it's not my story, it's his story told through my life. And so again, when you have proper perspective and context.
Can I make a couple comments?
Sure. Absolutely.
Sure.
All right. So Grant is you never know when he was talking about when he left home and went to college. And that's always when you go to college, not when you leave home and you start doing it and your world changes and you have all this freedom. And then you also have decide who you're going to be ultimately and all that kind of stuff. Well, what you don't know is what guys at our age do know. And that is what you think is going to happen probably ain't going to happen. And you got life just already planned out. I'm going to do this, and this. And so knowing that, because I was him, 25 years before, I know he's fixing to go off to school and all that stuff. And who knows what's going to happen. I'm praying that he'll find a faith, embrace his own faith. And I can't control that. Even if I tried, you can't make that happen. And so I will say that as long as I can remember, for our three boys, I prayed the prayer, the scripture that says, "And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man." And I've always prayed that prayer for our boys. And I have faith that, of course, the Lord hears and honors that prayer. And so then you watch as Grant and his brothers and sister, and they make the decisions, and there's no surprise. There's highs, there's lows, there's lots of surprises, things not going the way you thought. Grant, of our four kiddos, he's the only one that doesn't live in Texas. He's the one who most fiercely has always wanted to come back to Texas. He went to college in Arkansas. He's embarrassed to say that. I can kind of understand why. And so he couldn't wait to get back to, he's never made it back to Texas. And I told him years ago, I said, Grant, you're like Abraham. He left his native country never to return. And he learned a foreign language with weird people, and you're in Louisiana, boy. And so you may be a missionary there the rest of your life, but that's life. The way you think it's going to go and the way the Lord has it planned is never the same. So anyway, it's always interesting to see. Grant is got a lot of real strong leadership, qualities, and I see it as I can see them develop even from a boy. It's you want to step in and make life easier for them, and I guess they call it a helicopter parent, and hovering. I just didn't. And his wife, his mom, and I had probably more arguments about stuff like that because we're very opposite. But I know a couple things. Grant's not my child. We always talk to her about our kids. They're our kids, and they're not our kids.
No.
I mean, they're ours to raise. We're stewards of these kids, and when I realized that, I'm really praying to God that I can help. I need help raising these kids the way He wants them to be raised, and they covered a multitude of mistakes and sins on my part, and anybody who's been a dad knows what I'm talking about. But to see that despite all that, they muddle through, and not only muddle through, but have a glorifying lifestyle and impacting others and inspiring. Look, Grant's just now got kids to the age where he's starting to be inspired by his kids, which is a weird feeling. But when they get to that age where you can start going, when you start amening your own kids and wanting to hang around them, I always told Grant growing up, I said, Grant, if I was your age, I'd be your best buddy. You are my kind of guy. But by the way, you're not my age.
If you were my age, we'd have fought already.
But you're not. So I'm still your dad, and I'm not your best buddy. I'm your dad. There's a difference you'll learn later. Anyway, that's just kind of my perspective of as he was growing and his brothers and just raising kiddos. Trying to raise them right.
Yeah. I've always said that people will see or hear people will hear you or hear what you say more by what they see than anything you ever say.
Yeah.
So if we're living it and the way we're supposed to, our life is going to show before others. We won't have to say anything. And, a lot of times, and I've heard this more, man, I just read a book, Uncle Tony, there's Big Daddy, Uncle Tony. I just finished up his book, and he said the same thing. And I've heard it several times in the last couple of weeks. And I actually was able to do this with Todd's wife, Amanda, about 3 weeks ago. Sometimes people don't need scripture and verse. They need to know what Christ has done in our lives. You know, arguing with somebody or just trying to throw scripture at them, a lot of times that's not going to work. We just need to love them and let the love of Christ speak through us in what he's done in our own life. And that takes me to my next question for you, Grant. I didn't realize this about you until our last trip it was before Todd and I came back on that week, and Chad came up to record. I was watching the duck call room, and Rucker was on there, and John David started talking about. That's what inspired me about bringing you and Ruck on. When I heard John David talking about what you had done and the effect that you had, the impact that you had on Ruck. Well, then Todd and I, through our visit there, we start hearing other people talk, and we're hearing about the different people. And listen, this, just so everybody knows, this podcast is not here to put Grant or Mark Taylor on any kind of pedestal. What I want people to see through this podcast is that when you really focus your life upon Christ and you get Christ-centered, you have an ability to impact the lives around you. And what Todd and I were so amazed, we've talked about getting you on here, Grant, for some time. And I wanted to get your dad beside you because I kind of wanted to get his perspective from what he's seeing. My question for you is, was there ever a point that you kind of felt like that the discipleship thing, building into these others like Rucker or Rooster and only the good Lord above knows how many more. And I see what you did as directing the last men's retreat, how you were able to lead and pull those men in around you. And not only that, but how they loved you and they responded to you and react. I mean, that was really something to sit back and watch. So I guess my question to you is, was it a purposeful thing that you've done and the way you've done it? Or did it just kind of something that God has led you to and it's just kind of happened organically?
Ooh.
I threw a lot in there at him, didn't I, Mark?
Well, let me kind of break that down. So I think,
yeah, if you would, there's a lot there, Grant. I'm
going to break that down, but move through it as quickly as I can. So inherently, as the oldest of 4 children, there was some implied leadership, whether I wanted to be or not. Okay. So, and I was 4.5 years older than the next one. And so then they were basically 14 months apart. So it was like me and then 3. And so by the time I'm 12, 13 years old, I'm the designated babysitter. And
absolutely,
I didn't ask for that. I didn't apply for the job but
it just came along.
It just came along.
I'm trying to get him a driver's license at 12.
Right, so
imagine the benefit.
So I think, when you're home with some young kids, and you're like, all right, here's the deal. I don't want to be here. They don't want me to be here. But at the end of the day, when mom and dad come home, whatever has happened is ultimately on me because, and so if that's the case, so you have to kind of figure out how to lead people that don't want to be led by you. You know what I mean? And so, not that I even did a good job of that. Not that I do a good job of that now, but anyway, so start there. I think when you're the oldest child, you kind of have to figure stuff out. When you're a younger sibling, you kind of have a model that says, okay, I like that, I'm going to do that, or I don't like that. You know what I'm saying? There's at least a rabbit that's in front of you. So there's that. I think unequivocally and unquestionably, he always taught us kids to have confidence, to be leaders, and really to serve as leaders. Not just, hey, get out front and tell everybody what to do, but how to serve. And I learned that I could see there was so much intentionality in that from him. I couldn't help but learn that. And I honestly think intuitively, if Grant, without any, molding by my dad, I would go into a crowded room of people and hug the wall and go in the back corner and really not talk to anybody. But because he's a salesman and he taught me to be confident and he taught me to, do all these things, I learned how to be one of those people who would come up to you and shake your hand and engage and carry. That was a very learned behavior. And I witnessed him do that. I witnessed him serve. I witnessed him do things like take communion to shut-ins on Sundays after church. When everybody else was going out to the restaurant, we're going to get communion and we're going to these people's house, the elderly people who can't come to church. And we're sitting down with them and giving them communion. And then, then we're going to the nursing home, which is always, when you're 8, 9, 10, like, it's like, man.
So that ain't in the top 20 things
not,
you want to do
it's
that
not
day.
kind of what you had in mind, but we did it. And man, when people were moving, we would show up and help you move. And you know what I mean? Like, so I learned leadership, but through service. And so, and then as I got older, I just realized, like, if you take Rucker, for example, I think one of the things that struck me about Rucker was he had none of the advantages that I had. I mean, he didn't have a dad who was telling him to get off the video game, who was teaching him how to work, who was telling him to be confident, who was, putting him in position to kind of have the kind of failures, but also the support to help you through that failure. Man, I was 19 years old, kind of in my perspective, battling through some things. And he told me one time, he said, man, Grant, I'm going to tell you, he said, I want you to know that sometimes when you struggle, it's my fault. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? He goes, well, I pray for you to struggle. And I'm like, the heck kind of dad?
Hey, Dad, would you mind knocking that off a little bit?
Just hope he never starts praying for you to have patience.
Yeah, well, I mean, right? And that's why I coach little kids sports, because I prayed for patience one time. And he's like, oh, yeah, you want patience? Here you go. And,
There you go.
here you go. And but anyway, he's like, I pray for you to struggle. And I was like, again, another one of these times where if you were my age, we would fight. But he, he talked about James chapter 1, verse 19, which has become one of my favorite verses. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. And it was like, man, it took some maturing on my part to realize what that means and the intentionality to let me struggle. And that's tough. And sometimes I look at my kids and I'm like, man, you guys need to struggle some more, because, but Caitlin, my wife, from an early age, I would tell her, hey, these kids need to experience some adversity, and people don't want to put their kid in the nursery at church when they're 1 year old because they cry. And I'm like, no, they need to face some adversity and they need to struggle. James chapter 1, verse, they need to face some trials. And I'm like, by the way, if the 1 year old nursery is a trial where they have veggie tails, veggie straws, and a nice lady patting your back, like if that's a trial and you can't deal with that, you're really going to struggle on down the road.
It'll be a long life.
So you got a long answer to what does that mean? And I look at people like Brian Rucker, and I realize, sometimes those people don't have the same advantages that I did. And my job is not to just be, is to share those gifts and blessings with others. And so that's why Rucker and I have really kind of had that unique relationship that is friend, but with some kind of older brother / parental guidance, teaching him. He's learned a lot from him by proxy, by me kind of passing those lessons down, and he's grateful for it. And you know what? He's been receptive to it. Not everyone is receptive to it. Not everyone desires that, but so anyway, there's just a lot of leadership. And I think at a certain point as a teenager, I started to believe that, okay, I am a leader. I am confident. I am, you know what I mean? Like you enough people put you up there and you look around, people are following you, then you just kind of go, well, I guess I am. So, all right, here's where we're going.
So there's a lot of messages in these stories that we're raised reading as kids, and David wasn't powerful. It had nothing to do with those smooths. It had nothing to that. I mean, and so I realized that I have an obligation, a responsibility to use God-given talents and opportunities. And part of that is these 4 precious kids. And so there's a responsibility to raise them to be servant leaders. Both. They're independent, but they're powerful together. Servant leaders. And you can see many examples of that in the Bible. So it's not to our glory, and it's not what we're doing. We're just lumps of clay. And the Lord often reminds us of that. But yeah, that was very important to me. Not even that I aspired to do it. I just realized it was a responsibility. And partly because I was raised by a leader, and there's a responsibility to lead. It's easier not to lead. It's just easier. I've just seen y'all do it. But it's not about. I don't think the Lord would go, you got that right, Mark. I want you to have a life of ease. He didn't demonstrate that. That's not the message. No. So yeah, that was really frustrating to Grant and his siblings, like it was to me and my brothers when we were raised in a similar way. That's just how life is, and that's your responsibility here, to embrace where the Lord puts you, and serve others through your talent. So yeah, I'm following.
We're purified through the fire. That's how they, separate, the pure gold from the garbage. It has to be done in the fire.
Yeah,
in the furnace.
man, look, there's plenty of opportunities. Is probably an abundance, and people who say, yeah, well, Grant, I mean, I've struggled a lot and I've made a lot of mistakes, and it's if a guy like Rooster Hamby had met me at 25 instead of 35, it may have been different. You know what I mean? He may not have. It takes. So for a guy like Rucker, as much as maybe I've sharpened him, he sharpened me.
He sharpened you.
And Rooster, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's not a, and I appreciate all those things, but man, they're whittling on me and molding me and knocking those rough edges off of me in the very same way. And together we're both becoming more equipped to share on down the line. And so,
yeah.
Anyway, it's amazing for me, Mark, to see how Grant and Chad has that kind of heart. My youngest that was with us, both of my boys have huge hearts, but Chad's probably got the biggest one. But to not take his upbringing for granted, excuse me, but to turn what he has and the way he was raised into a positive to affect others.
John, I remember when I got to the point when I left home and all this stuff that I thought I finally some freedom. I felt like I graduated from high school and got out of the Marine Corps on the same day. I got out of the house and yippee. Well, it wasn't until then that I was shocked and humbled to realize how much my parents poured into me, and I had not only no concept, but very little appreciation for it. First of all, I just thought that was just normal. And second of all, I didn't really like it. So when I met others who had tough, tragic childhoods, and I'm like, I just was so grateful and told my parents many, many times over. And when our kids, I knew that would happen sooner or later. And it has. And so when they come back and say, Dad, Mom, thank you. You're like, it was all worth it. You're welcome. Now go do the same with your kids.
Now go repeat it.
Yeah.
And let me spoil them.
That's exactly right. That's the season I love right now.
So
Yeah, even tonight, my kids are walking in like, "Hey, Papa, look at this new baseball bat I got." I'm like, well, it's two things: quit, and two, he don't appreciate those things because he's never seen, like this new baseball
Grant
bat.
had a wooden one that we bought at a garage sale for $2.
Like, he's
no,
he's not
Mark.
impressed by your new baseball bat. Okay, go put it back and just don't tell him that we did that.
It was a wiffle ball bat with about 2 rolls of red or black electrical tape wrapped around it.
That's right.
And you do the same thing with the wiffle ball.
But one quick story, and this is just the kind of one year, and he, I think if he had this to do over again, if he knew what an impact that he made, maybe he would do something.
Probably scarred him for life. Tell me the story. I don't know what
Maybe he didn't, but one year, when I got into deer hunting, man, I was like, I need a new deer rifle. Like I want a deer rifle for Christmas, and so, like you put it on the list and you communicate, hey, this is what I'm hoping for Christmas, and man, Christmas is getting close, and you're looking for that rifle-shaped box under the tree, and I'll be doggone if it wasn't a couple of days out, there it is, it's over there. You kind of save that one for last, because you want to kind of build to that.
Up to it.
Here we go. And we get, and I'll get all these credits. I'm like, I'm saving that one, and finally get to it, and I rip that thing open, and instead of it being a rifle, a new deer rifle, it is a fence stretcher. Okay,
Brand new one.
Brand new one. Fence stretcher. So you go out there and the fence is, bro, you can stretch the fence tight, and and it was not a deer rifle. And I'm like, dang, man, like it's one thing to give your son a fence stretcher, but on the and there was no rifle. All
right, so as heartbreaking that is, the other side of that story is
I had a tragic childhood.
I simply went to the feed store one day. I needed a fence stretcher, and then it was in December, and I bought the thing, and the lady goes, "You want me to wrap that for you?" And I thought, yeah, go ahead. That's it. All right. So Grant had his share of deer rifles growing up. He's got plenty of them now, more than I do. But anyway, I thought, what the heck? And so I put it in the tree, and you probably thought it was
You
going to
could
be
have picked any one of the 4 kids, but it was me, So it might
scarred you a
I've
little
overcome.
bit.
We've overcome. We've moved on. We've grown.
That was going to be one of my questions was Grant, was who you get your sense of humor from? And I see now it's evident. I don't have to ask. So I got, on that same note, Grant, I got a story for you.
Okay.
So my wife,
Civil War. We from
no, not quite that far. Almost. Your dad and I are almost old enough to go back that far. So my wife and I, we'd been married. It wasn't long after we'd lost our daughter. And we were getting ready to go. I think we were getting ready to go to Scotland at this time to be stationed over there. And everybody in West Virginia, her family, West Virginia had just come out with the lifetime hunting license, and they were like $300, and everybody was getting them. And I just knew mine was coming. I'd asked for it. I knew it was coming. So I saved that last box because I knew that was going to be that West Virginia lifetime hunting license. Yeah, it was a gold necklace. You know who wore that gold necklace? My wife. She may still be wearing that gold necklace.
It's a lifetime golden necklace. See?
Hey, there you go. There you go.
Hey, by the way, to put a bow on this, where is that fence stretcher?
The fence stretcher's out in the barn right now.
Your barn. He will give it to his grandkids. You watch.
I wouldn't put that on them.
Hey,
Well, I didn't say you give it to them for Christmas.
As long as they know how to use it, that's the key.
Mark, I thought you were going to say, now take this fence stretcher and go stretch the neighbor's fence, and you can earn the money to buy that rifle. That's what I was waiting on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so we got about 5 minutes left, real quick.
All right.
Grant, where did you get your love for the outdoors and hunting from your dad? Is that where you learned that or got that from?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember being a little kid and him sharing stories about growing up at his grandparents' farm, and he was a really, really good storyteller when I was a kid. You know, he used to ride bulls, and he used to, I just remember being a little kid, you know, 4, 5, 6 years old, and him telling his stories. And man, I could probably still tell you some of his stories that he would tell me. And yeah, so I did. And man, I remember getting the first BB gun, and I remember, you know, him taking me dove hunting, and not just me, but my uncles and granddad. And so, yeah, it was a real big family thing for us, getting to hunt together. And, you know, when I got to high school, a couple years after I'd started shooting deer, now I became a guide for the younger siblings. And now it was me and him, you know, I was
A freebie, another freebie, Mark.
yeah. It's like, okay, you shot a deer the
He
last.
thought I'm just teaching him how to hunt for himself.
Yeah.
There you go.
There are pictures of Grant standing there at the deer blind with at different stages of his life with different siblings, you know, under his arm there, and he's taking them out hunting while I'm taking. Anyway, I will tell you one thing. This was important to me. I've never raised kids, and so they don't come with an instruction manual. I remember when I was Grant was just probably in junior high, and I was helping one of the guys at the church in his house one day, and he said, "Hey, Mark." He had his son who was in high school, and I noticed he had some hunting dogs in the backyard. And I said, "John, I didn't know you had hunting dogs." And he goes, "Yeah, and I got some mules too." Because I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because John Jr. is at that age where he likes to coon hunt, and so we got us some coon dogs and some mules, and we go all the time." He said, "Here's some advice. You need to figure out something you can do with your kids now when they're young and they enjoy it and y'all like to do it together, whatever it is, sports, hunting, whatever. Go to museums, I don't care, whatever it is, because there's going to be a time when it's going to be hard. And
Yep, that's right.
if you'll have something that you have a common interest in, it'll help you work through it, and you can enjoy it for life." Well, our deer lease was 3 hours away, which was perfect. We had a lot of conversations, some that he didn't want to have, some that I didn't want to have, all the way there and all the way back. And we had a lot, just him and his siblings. That was great time, but great advice. I've got a lot of great advice from people who've got scars on them like I do, you know, life scars. And that was important. So that's how he convinced his mom that we need to spend the money on a deer lease, because that was the next step.
Yeah, something I really appreciate that I think that Adam LaRoche or some of those guys do. I know that Phil and them do it there, where they bring in the veterans for the veteran hunts and take care of our veterans. And that's did you ever get to participate much in that, Grant, whenever you was with Buck Commander?
Oh man, not only did I, but I still do. In fact,
Well, I got a question for you. I got a vet I want to talk to you about.
okay, we'll talk about it offline.
Yeah, talk about offline. I can't. Yeah, I have to be careful.
Still do that, and it, you know, it's honestly, when you talk about discipleship, it's some of my favorite hunts, because you know, you hunt so much, sometimes you put this pressure on yourself to kill stuff. But when you go with those guys, man, I just take my pack and my coffee and my binoculars and get to see it through their eyes and experience it them. And, you know, it doesn't take long sitting there with somebody when you can just ask them a couple really simple questions, not even leading questions. Just, "Hey, where are you from? Tell me about your family." Before you know it, man, you're out there looking at, you know, creation, and they're just, man, you really forge a bond. And so, yeah, it's been incredibly impactful, and such a you know, you think you're doing it for them, and then you walk away from that realizing you got, you know, so much out of that as well, maybe even more than they did. So, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of them walking around that look, just because they have all four limbs and they look healthy, they're a walking nightmare and mess. I mean, they've got a lot of issues. And yeah, I know some guys that do a lot for them too. And I know that Richie, my oldest, he's a JTAC. He calls in close air support for ground troops. He's did a tour in Iraq and two in Afghanistan. And I don't know how many of the JTACs, his fellow guys that's in the same line of work of what he does, that I'll get on Facebook and there's another black ribbon. And and I'll send him a message and it's just somebody else that's taken their life. And so any hope that we can, that's one of the things that I love to do here is to bring hope to others and man, to show people that you don't have, being a Christian doesn't make you a prune. It doesn't make you a raisin. You don't have to be miserable. I mean, man, we have sat here and laughed and talked and carried on and talked about, what God's done in our lives. And this is awesome. And I want people to see that people like this are out there. And Grant, I'm like you, being raised in Southern West Virginia and Southern Appalachia, you walk into a church with a hat on, you better hope they only hit your head because you're going to get jack slapped. That thing's coming off. They ain't going to ask you to take it off. They're going to slap it off your head. So I get it, man. It's different. And it's just some of those that we have to learn. And I still deal with that. I take my hat off, but I'm not going to criticize or ridicule anybody else that doesn't.
Right.
Right. So fellas, I can't, Todd, you got anything else before we get off here?
Yeah, I got,
you got 12 questions. It's all right.
A scripture. Mark, do you have a scripture that has kind of threaded your life? And Grant, the same question to you.
Oh, that's good.
I'm going to, it's funny you mentioned that because probably about 10 days ago, I was thinking about that because people are often asked, what's your favorite scripture? I just got to tell you, it's kind of almost like a flavor of the week because there's so many scriptures that have shaped and molded my life at different times. I do not have a favorite scripture. I will tell you this, a bunch of them are in the book of Proverbs.
Oh, okay.
My dad, I remember as a kid, my dad reading his Bible, which was impactful to me and more so as I got older. But his favorite book was Proverbs. And we talked about many a proverb at the kitchen table. We had a lot of conversations at the kitchen table, but Proverbs, I'm gonna just say that as a blanket.
Right.
Lost in Proverbs pretty quick.
He doesn't remember which one, but the book, yes. Read Proverbs, and he likes that.
They never outgrow it.
So, for me, to answer your question, Todd, it's funny because yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the day before, I was riding along with my 9-year-old, and he found his Bible in the front seat of the truck, and he's flipping, and he asked me, he said, "Dad, what's your favorite verse of the Bible?" And I was like, "Man, that's a pretty big question for a 9-year-old." And I'm like, "Is this for school? Did they tell you to do this?" And but one is in James chapter 1 because he told me he prayed for me to struggle. That's been incredibly impactful for me. Two of my other favorites, Acts chapter 20, verse 22 through 24, when the Apostle Paul, is talking about, I don't know what's going to be before me, but all I know is that prison and hardship are facing me. But I consider my life worth nothing to me, but that I may finish the race and attest to the glory of Jesus. And so, that's obviously a paraphrase, but that one, for him to say, "Hey man, my life is really worth nothing to me. Like what I do, that's where I have to be. Whatever I do on this earth is just a means to finishing the race." The other is Romans 8, which is rich, but 5 through 7, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the spirit is life and peace. And I think so often we become governed by the flesh, and I don't even mean, but I'm just saying like the things of the world that, we allow to kind of gradually distract us. And that's destruction. And what we really want and why people want the Jesus they see in us is because they desire peace. And so when your mind is governed by the Spirit, you find peace. And so
Peace.
those are a couple of my favorites. Peace.
Excellent.
Quick fire. 2 questions or 1 question each person. Quick fire. Now, Mark, you get to think about it because I know same questions coming at you. Grant,
A little slower. Yeah, he's a little slower.
Thank you.
if you could view a sunset anywhere in the world with your wife, where would it be?
Man, if she's beside me, does it matter? You know,
If she's sitting there, let her whisper it to you, and then you can say it. That way you'll know.
She'll probably hear this later, so make it good.
I don't know, man. Like she's our back porch. How about that?
All right, I'm going to say, all right, Mark, where you got?
You know, I was going to say the same thing. Listen, there are a lot of beautiful places, but I prayed earlier tonight. Thanks for today and where I was today. Everywhere I look, there's evidence of God. So I really don't need to go. I don't need to go anywhere for that to be special. It's special off my back porch, which
99% of the guests that I asked that, it's either front porch or back porch.
Yeah.
With the exception of one podcast. And you got 3 different answers. From
Yeah.
three different
I was
locations.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Maui.
Maybe I shouldn't put that
Colorado.
podcast on here. Yeah. So, hey, so listen, I'm going to go ahead and get us out of here. Yeah. Thank y'all so much
for spending time with us and talking with us. It was absolutely enjoyed beyond belief.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's awesome having you guys
It's a
here.
privilege. And thank you for what you guys do, John and Todd. You know, man, it's crazy that we live in a world where the 4 of us can convene and have a conversation like this, but also develop a friendship and a relationship that transcends any kind of mileage that is between us. And so thank you guys for, man, you guys have a level of persistence and commitment that I admire. And
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Love you guys, and thanks for.
On the other side, I got something for you, Grant.
Okay.
Yeah, just stick around. Don't jump out yet till we get out of here. Hey, everybody, go to forerunnerproductions.locals.com, forerunnerproductions.com. You can also catch us at Let's Talk Fortitude on YouTube, and you'll find that through Let's Talk Fortitude. Also, real quick, I'd like to give Old 18 Outfitters a quick shout out. They're down in Houston, Texas, by the way. It's Randy Bougele. It's him and Lucky Riley. It's their they make fishing rods. It's like a little outfitter business. It's all veterans operated and everything. Anyway, and thank you guys so much for being here. And the episode that we're talking about, you heard us talking about Rucker and Grant together. That's one we shot when we were in Louisiana back in the second week of December. It's in the playlist for Let's Talk Fortitude. So on YouTube. So jump in there and see it. You will not be disappointed. I guarantee it. Fellas, hang on the backside. I'm going to get us out of here. And if I can get my mouse to work.